All right, guys. Next one, if you're still following along in your lab book, as I hope you are. So next one, if we look at number 2 on page 56, there's something called a monohybrid cross. And all that means is that we're looking at two parents, we're looking at their potential offspring, and we're looking at one trait. And a trait is just a physical characteristic, like hair color or eye color. In my last example, skin color, anything like that. So in this question, we're looking at pea plants. Now, the guy who is considered the father of modern genetics studied pea plants initially. So that's what we're going to do. Now, in our example, we have two genes in our pea plants because we are going to look at color. My backwards writing is getting worse and worse. So, in these plants, the color green, represented by our big G because it's dominant, and then we have our yellow gene, which is recessive. Now, I know they're both represented by the same letter. One's capital, one's lowercase, but this word starts with a Y. That's just the way it is. The dominant gene is also always capitalized. The lowercase gene is always lowercase, it's always recessive. And it's easy to use the same letter to keep track of everything, especially if you're talking about multiple genes. So if we were talking about color and, the amount of peas that a plant produces and how tall it is and all that stuff, you'd want to use, G's for one and maybe H's for another, K's for another, or whatever, because otherwise it's just going to be too confusing. So, we're going to look at peas. Now, the example that we have, as I told you, big G is dominant, that's green. Little g is recessive, that's yellow. So we are going to cross two parents. Now there's a little bit more terminology that we have to go over. There are two words that are going to help us really understand these. The first word is homozygous. And what that means is just that there's, in both of these cases, these individuals, this is one parent, this is the other parent, these guys are homozygous for their genes. So homozygous means same. The prefix homo means same. So this guy over here is homozygous for green color, because it's got two of the same genes and it's the green gene. Over here, this guy is homozygous for yellow. It's got two little g's. So we would say that this one is homozygous dominant. This guy is homozygous recessive. The other term we use is called heterozygous. The prefix hetero meaning different. And that just means you have one of each. So if we had an individual whose genes was this is homozygous. So if I say heterozygous, So if I say homozygous or heterozygous, you should be able to figure out what I'm talking about, okay? So these two parents right here are going to reproduce, these two pea plants right here. So we have, first question is, what are the parents' genotypes? So what genes do they have? Now, we can see pretty clearly, this guy's only got big G's, this guy's only got little g's. So this one can only pass on big G's to their kid. This one can only pass on little g's to their kid. So if we undergo meiosis and we produce sex cells, This guy is only going to be able to give a big G to the kid. This guy's only going to be able to give a little g to the kid. So, now, I wrote a P. P just means parent, like a parent's generation, so like the first generation of things that we're crossing. So, F1 is their first generation of babies. So, if we've got this parent, and we know that this parent can only pass on a big G, and this parent can only pass on a little g, then all their babies have to be this, right? Because parent can't give what they don't have. So, all these guys, the first generation, are going to look like this. Now, these guys were green, these guys were yellow. These guys are going to all be green. And why is that? Because we have a dominant gene right here. Green is dominant to yellow. So if this guy's got a green gene and a yellow gene, the plant itself is going to be green. Okay? But now we're going to take two individuals with this genotype. Kind of hard to read. This one. So we have two parents that are like this. Draw the X to make it consistent. So we've got two of these guys. Now we have to do a little bit of math this time, remember. So this parent can give either a big G or a little g. This parent can give either a big G or a little g. Now, there's an easy way to figure out the different combinations in this case. This is called a Punnett square. A Punnett square is a really easy way of figuring out the possible babies that can be produced from a cross like this. So what you do is you put one parent across the top. There. One parent across the top, the other parent down the side. Now, technically it doesn't really matter. We'd prefer to have the egg down the side and the sperm across the top. But if you don't write that way, I'm not going to count. It doesn't matter. As long as you get the right answer, that's what I care about. So, now that we have our thing set up, so our parent that's down the side can give either a big G or a little g. Our parent across the top can either give a big G or a little g. So now we just have to match everything up. Yep. So if we go down and across this first box right here, big G's here, big G's here. So this individual is going to be big G, big G. Next one, this one up here, we've got a big G and a little g. So this individual is going to be big G, little g. Same with this guy down here. We've got a big G here, little g here, go across, big G, little g. Now this guy down in the corner, we've got a little g and a little g. So it's little g, little g. Now, if we look at this box and we're looking at how these look, genotype versus phenotype. So these are the genotypes for their possible babies. Now, this doesn't mean that they're only going to have 4 babies. This is just a ratio or a proportion. If they had, 1,000, you'd be able to more or less figure out approximately how many of each genotype there was, if you knew the genotypes of the parents. If we look at how these plants look, so we look at the phenotype, we have 3 green and 1 yellow. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, gonna go on to the next video.